Diane Terry of Windermere Real Estate, and you are watching The Neighbors Are Talking. Hello everyone, this is Diane Terry with Windermere Real Estate. I'm starting 2019 with a new series of YouTubes that is called The Neighbors Are Talking, which, as you know, has been my slogan since the very beginning 28 years ago. There's no neighbor that's been more interesting to me or fascinating to me in my 28 years in real estate than Florence Ellison. She really understands the history of Queen Anne Park, which is one of my most favorite pockets of Queen Anne, and it is very special, and I thought that I would invite Florence today to share her knowledge with us of the history of Queen Anne Park. So Florence, thank you for coming, and can you please share with us how you came upon Queen Anne Park?
In 1977, my husband and I had just become engaged, and we were in our early 30s, and he was working out of his partner's house on Kinnear on the south slope of Queen Anne, and I was teaching school in Redmond, and we didn't really want to live in the suburbs.
I understand that.
Exactly, and so we had thought, well, maybe Madison Park, maybe Montlake, but there really was nothing there that was going to work for us, or at least we hadn't come across it. So one Sunday morning I was looking in the paper, and there was this little house on Conkling Place that was on the market, and the house would not have worked for us at all, but we fell in love with the neighborhood. Later in July, I shrieked because there was a house. It's next to the house where I am right at this moment in Queen Anne Park. And so we came, we looked at the house, we fell in love with it. We already were in love with the neighborhood. And there were 2 full price offers.
Oh, so it was a hot market even back then?
It was a hot market even back then.
And what year was that again?
1977.
Yeah.
And by the way, Diane sold our house for us, and she did a fabulous job.
Thanks, Florence. Now, Queen Anne Park's always had this fallacy, this notion about it, that it was something other than it really was. And it wasn't until you started digging in and doing the research, which, by the way, is prolific, and anyone that wants to get into it can go to the Queen Anne Historical Society website, and there's reams of the research that you've done. But tell us what was the fallacy and what got you started on really digging into what happened way back when?
Well, way back when, in 1925, I had learned, and it is true, that there was a gentleman named George Morford, and he bought this property, and it was sold by the city of Seattle, and he bought the entire neighborhood that now has almost 230 houses in it for $25,000.
Oh. So Morford bought all of this land for $25,000, which is incredible. And then tell us how he began to develop.
Morford was married to the daughter of a Seattle philanthropist, and so Morford had some money to work with. So he bought that in 1925 on the 18th of November. He, on the 11th of February in 1926, Queen Anne Park, the Queen Anne Park addition to the city of Seattle, was platted. And so then it was time to do something with the property. And there was a gentleman who was named Leroy Grandy, and he's the one who developed this area, or started developing it, but his initial training was as a Methodist minister. He worked that for 5 years, and then he started building fabulous neighborhoods. So he had this vision, and you could not go for a week at a time even before you started reading in the Seattle Times about Queen Anne Park and what was going on here and so forth.
Tell us about the styles of homes that were offered at the time.
Well, there were no houses at the time, so what people did is they bought property, they bought a lot, they found whatever they wanted, and then on site they had architects, they had millworks, they had all of these things. So they bought the house basically and the lot together, and then they could either buy one of the few that had already been built, or they could have their architect design one for them. And the house that we're sitting in right now was designed by someone named Fred Rogers, who also designed our house next door.
Fred Rogers is somewhat known for his Tutors, and especially on Conkling Place here where we are, there seem to be several of them. And everyone that I have sold, you know, the craftsmanship is, even after all these years, impeccable, and some really fine attention to detail. Another thing that I've always noticed is that there's a little breakfast nook in the kitchen, which I think is darling, and coved ceilings, leaded glass, beautiful inlaid wood floors, all kind of trademarks of that era. One thing I noticed in Queen Anne Park is that the style of homes are varied. They're not all Tudors. We even have some Spanish style homes here. My favorite, aside from your house, Florence, my favorite house that I listed here is 836 West Etruria, which has a really interesting history, I think. Can you share with our viewers a little bit about what you know?
Leroy Grandy, who was the contractor who was doing all of these houses, he was truly a man before his time, and women had just received the right to vote. And he had this idea that women who run the households, who do the cooking and the chores and all of that, probably had some really good ideas. So he and the Seattle Times had a contest for women to submit their designs, their ideas for a house, what would make it really good for them. And so there was a house, there was a lot on Etruria where this house was going to be. The woman who won was named Catherine H.K. Wolf, and she followed the rules for this house. It could not cost more, in those days, more than $8,500. It should be 6 rooms. Can you imagine a house today being built with only 6 rooms? Hardly. One of the things is that they really wanted to use all local materials, all Northwest materials. And
so they had their local mill shop right here in Queen Anne Park, and most of the homes that I've seen have beautiful inlaid mahogany and oak floors. I mean, the craftsmanship in these homes is really second to none. We've done 10th West, we've come around West Etruria, and now we're on Conkling Place, where we sit in Chris's beautiful home. And Conkling Place is really known for the Tutors. So many rows of Tutors. Can you tell us a little bit more about those?
Fred Rogers, the architect who designed this house we're sitting in our house, we believe also designed some of the other ones, but because when Queen Anne Park was being built, we were running into the years of the Depression.
Right.
For a long time, there were partially completed houses on the street and so forth. There is one of the Tutors that's down here, we call the 5, because there are 5 that have a lot of similarities. But I looked and I found that the initial permit for building the house was dated, and then a couple of years later there was another permit, and it just said like continuation of, and listed the first permit.
What I love about Queen Anne Park is you're still on Queen Anne, but you're on the north end. This feels almost like suburbia within a very urban setting. You're right above Seattle Pacific, so for those with families, great babysitters, I'm just saying. You also have access to all the beautiful concerts, plays, and cultural things that are going on at the university. And it's really a very easy commute off this hill. You can roll off onto Elliott and go straight into downtown, or it's very easy to get on 99. I just think it's always been Queen Anne's best kept secret. I know everybody clamors to live at the top of the hill, but this is just a very special pocket. It's quiet, it feels safer. Everybody knows one another, and there's a real sense of neighborhood here that I have always treasured. Florence, you've been great, and I hope that we can talk you into coming back and doing part 2 later this year. We miss you, and you were here from 77 to 2017, and you have contributed so much to the history of the neighborhood that will live on forever, and we're all very grateful. And I'm going to really talk you into coming back this summer and doing the walking tour with us.
Well, I love Queen Anne Park so much that it's not hard to talk me into that. It's a wonderful place, and thank you for having me.
It's a wonderful place, but you're a wonderful human being, Florence. Thank you so much.
Thank you.